I'd love to start off and be completely realistic with you and to say that I really do believe that breakups are single-handedly the worst thing that any person can psychologically go through in their lives. And as much as I think that's true, I also believe that it's one of the greatest opportunities that we can ever have to really build something with our lives and to really find the motivation and drive to see how far we can really push ourselves. It does something to our psyche and to our body that simply can't be imitated, and it gives us a freakish amount of drive, a freakish amount of energy, and if utilised in the right way, we can make it the start of our lives as opposed to potentially the end. So in this video we're going to cover three things. First of all is the science behind why we feel so terrible when we go through a breakup. Number two, I'm going to give you a justification for my opening statement as to why breakups can be the catalyst to the best life that you could possibly ever live. And the third and last thing that I'm going to go through is I'm going to give you the exact steps that you need to take in order to make the most of your breakup and in order to win it. So chapter one, the science and psychology behind why we feel bad. And it's important to understand this because when we have a proper grasp of what our body is doing, what our brain is reacting to, and we can take approachable steps every day to overcome it and make it more manageable. But very simply, our brain loves familiarity. The reason it loves familiarity is because it only has a certain amount of processing power. And if our brain was to absorb every single part of what's around us through our senses, our brain would simply explode. There's just far too much information, far too much going on. So what it does is it fills in the gaps. It takes in the most important parts, or what it considers the most important parts, and then it fills in the rest with colour and its own ideas. So we don't actually perceive reality so much, but more we create our own version of it. And that's important to understand because as we get older, our brain has to put energy into other things, keeping us alive, raising children, developing relationships, and it doesn't want to put so much time into perceiving the world around us, and so it starts filling the gaps even more. When your life is familiar, it's much easier for your brain to do that, and it has to put less energy into things like keeping you alive. But when we lose a big part of our life's familiarity, it becomes a lot more difficult for our brain to predict what's going on, and its external response is to pump you full of cortisol because it thinks we're under attack, which obviously isn't the case, but you're now going through your life with your brain fighting against you, trying to regain some of that familiarity so it can get easier at predicting things, and it keeps you in this horrible fight or flight mode, pumped full of cortisol, and you're kind of always anxious and looking around. And obviously with the lens of social media at the moment is making breakups a lot more difficult because we can still see that person in our time and space, whereas in the olden days, you just never see them again, and your brain could comprehend that and it would be a lot easier. Nowadays, it's a lot more difficult. So in short, your brain's just fighting against you to keep you safe, trying to gain some consistency and familiarity back in your life. Chapter number 2, why can breakups be the catalyst and the door into an even greater life? Well, through this process and through that biological response that our brain's going through to keep us safe, we get this heightened level of energy and emotion, which very simply cannot be replicated or imitated in any way. So whilst we're in that area of healing and trying to get over our breakup, we can use that energy and that focus in an extremely productive way. And very simply put, you're never going to have this level of drive, energy or focus ever again in your life until maybe you go through another breakup, or perhaps you're being chased by a tiger. And so why not use it to the best of your ability? Why not use as much of that energy to be productive and to build something amazing? Also another reason with the heartbreak, with the disappointment of losing someone that perhaps you thought you were going to spend more time with or perhaps spend forever with, we're often quite hard on ourselves. I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing in the world, because it delivers a level of introspection which allows us to really appreciate what's important to our lives and what's not important with our lives. And so from this moment onwards, we will no longer be spending our time doing things that we don't really appreciate, and we can start spending our times doing things that we really do love. And although it's really disappointing that we've gone through the breakup, you can then jumpstart your life from this moment, and you can just spend more time doing the things that you love. You may have worked it out eventually, but this is just a shortcut, and that can be really useful as well. Before I get into exactly how you should be acting through this breakup to get the most out of it, as discussed, I've built a tool that I want to share with you. It'll take 90 seconds to complete. It's completely free to use. And you're going to answer 10 very simple questions, and it's going to deliver you the answer as to which parts of your life are really holding you back from the life that you should be living. Everybody has a gap between the life they're currently living and the life that they want to live. And the first step of closing that gap is to understand which aspects of their life are holding them back. Basically calling out on your bullshit. So click on the link below for the diagnostic quiz, fill it in, and let me know in the comments about which aspects of your life is holding you back the most. And I want to know what you think is the best solution to move forward with it. Okay, chapter number 3. And to get through this part, I want to answer 3 things. First of all, I'm going to tell you how you should act. Number 2, I'm going to tell you how disciplined you need to be and when. And lastly, I'm going to address how sad you should be, or if you should allow yourself to feel sad. And to be very clear and very honest, I've been through 2 pretty soul-crushing breakups, and I'm living proof that these things work. And through the work I now do with a lot of my clients, I've used the same techniques, I've used the same ideas, and they've all had incredible success. I've had exes coming back, and they've got back together for the right reasons. I've had them start living a life that they absolutely love. Their exes wanted them back, and they've gone ahead and said, actually, you know what? I'm so happy in my new life, I don't want you back, which I think are the 2 biggest testaments to how well these things work. First thing you should be doing is absolutely no contact, especially for the first 2 months. The only time you can break that is if they've had some bad health news or a bereavement, in which case just send them a message, be a nice person, offer your condolences, and then carry on. Don't use that moment to manipulate them into conversation. You're just going to be a good person. You need to redevelop your relationships with your friends, create new friendships, and put that energy back into your family. Socializing as much as possible is such a good way to reconnect with yourself. And please do be conscious about how much you're drinking, because hangovers are our worst enemy in this moment. Doesn't mean we can't have a few drinks, but really don't try to overdo it. I think it's such an overlooked and essential part of this process. You should 100% be challenging yourself physically in sports, gym classes, general exercise, just being outdoors. You need to have an external outlet to let all that emotion, all that energy into something physical. That is an essential part of giving your brain the best chance to understand and develop these very confusing and very aggressive thoughts and feelings that you have. And on the other side of that, as useful as it is to, let the emotions out in a very practical and physical way, we should also tone it down and become more creative. Consume less, create more. Use the energy to do something physical, use the emotion to create something beautiful. It might help you make sense of it a bit more. It might help you get in touch with something that you really enjoy doing, but use that painful emotion to create something beautiful. I think it's such an important step. And lastly, I want you to be talking to your friends about the breakup as much as you feel comfortable with. And if you feel like you're getting too much of a drain by talking about it all the time, you do need to be pretty careful that you don't just sound like a broken record. There is a time and a place to talk about it. And if you feel like you're overstepping the mark, I need you to be writing those feelings down. Whether you talk about it or write it down, I don't care, but never ever keep your thoughts and your emotions bottled up in your head. It is without doubt the worst way to deal with these things. Being disciplined through this process is really important, but it's not as important as most people think. We just need to be very disciplined at 2 parts of the day. That's when you first wake up and when you go to bed. Everything else should be like a domino and fall into place if those 2 things are the only 2 times you've been disciplined. The time between when you wake up and when you get out of bed and get your day moving is essential. So you need to spend less than 5 minutes. You need to get up, get showered, get dressed, have some food, make your bed before you ever go on your phone. That is an absolute non-negotiable for me. And if we feel like we need to get into bed later, we can absolutely do that. We can absolutely rest and relax. But the start of your day will put you in such good stead, and it'll help you really clean your mind and process your thoughts in a very productive way throughout the day, which is important. And secondly, it's going to bed at night. We need to make sure that we have our things cleared up for the next day. So getting up out of bed is easier because we have things laid out. And we need to make sure that we have a clear cut-off point of what time we're going to get off our phone in the evening. The last thing you should be doing is scrolling social media through a breakup anywhere near before bed. It's just going to disrupt sleep. And the whole point of this is that sleep is your best friend in processing your emotions and just making you feel not so crap. And if we can get a good night's sleep, it is just the biggest cheat code. So exercise and dealing with our emotions equals good sleep, equals the best sleep that you can possibly have. And that is going to be a complete game changer. And to answer a question that I get asked a lot, should we be feeling sad? Do we have to pretend that we're not sad? I think there is nuance to the question. I think we obviously absolutely should feel the sadness and should address it for what it is. We are grieving somebody and it is a huge loss in our lives. But sometimes we can be focused too much on, the rest of our lives as opposed to the present moment. And so that sadness can be a lot more. You're thinking about how you've lost someone for the next 60 years as opposed to you're losing them for a couple of months. So we need to do our best to become more present. And so how we do that is we got to allow ourselves to be sad and to grieve that person. But there also does have to become an element of allowing yourself a certain amount of time to grieve and be sad. And there needs to come a time where we just get on with it and suck it up. And that's why speaking to your friends about it too much can be a bit damning, because you can start feeding narratives into yourself and it can start painting a story that may not even be true. So feel the feelings, be sad, talk to your friends about it as much as possible, but please don't overdo it. Give yourself a very harsh cut-off point and maybe start practicing on nights out, going, you know what, tonight I'm not going to mention her or his name at all. Maybe every other night out you do that, and you start having phone calls with your friends where you start practicing not bringing up their names, and that will really help you out in the long term. So that's a very brief overview on how you should be dealing, but it's a long ongoing process. Take it easy, relax, take your time with it, but in the right moments be aggressive. If you'd like any support, you can find my details in the link below, or comment, and I'll get back to every single one of you. And I wish you all the best. I understand that this is such a tricky situation, but let's make the most of it.